The sky over San Francisco was gray that Monday morning as Elena Cruz carefully stepped into the small recruitment office of a private chauffeur agency. Her long hair was tucked beneath a baseball cap, a baggy jacket hung off her frame, and her faded jeans brushed the tops of her scuffed sneakers. Every step was shaky, not from the cold, but from the fear of being found out. "You sure about this, kid?" Uncle Marco whispered, eyes darting across the room. Elena swallowed hard, her fingers brushing over the fake ID in her pocket. It read, Ely Cruz, gender, male. "I don't have a choice anymore, Uncle," she said, trying to keep her voice low and deep. "It's been 2 months without work. Mom needs medication, and the doctor said if we don't get surgery soon, she could—" Her voice cracked. Marco sighed. He used to work as a private driver for high-profile clients and knew the unspoken rule well. No female drivers allowed, for security reasons. But looking at Elena's determined eyes, he simply nodded. "This is fraud, Elena. If you get caught—" "I'm willing to do anything for my mom," she interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "Even if it means wearing a mask every day." 3 days later, Elena completed a crash course in defensive driving and received her professional license under her new identity. Every document checked out. On paper, she was a man. When her best friend Rena found out, she nearly screamed over the phone, "You've lost your mind. Pretending to be a guy? That's not risky, it's a felony." "And what about my mom?" Elena replied, gripping her phone. "I can't sit here watching her fade day by day." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rena sighed. "I don't agree with this, but I won't abandon you either." That night, Elena stood in front of the mirror, staring at the new version of herself. Baseball cap, chest binder, a voice trained to be deeper, eyes that had learned how to hide fear. She was no longer Elena. From now on, she was Ely Cruz, male driver for Blackwell Enterprises. That night, Elena sat silently beside her mother's bed, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting gentle shadows on her mother's frail face. Her hands trembled slightly, yet she still managed a smile when she saw her daughter. "You don't have to do anything reckless, Elena," her mother whispered. "I'll be fine." Elena gripped her hand tightly, eyes glistening. "Mom, I can't just sit and watch you like this. Each day you get weaker, your breathing gets worse. I feel useless." "You've done more than enough. Don't sacrifice yourself any further." Elena lowered her head, voice trembling. "I have to. Every minute I do nothing feels like one more step closer to losing you. I can't mess this up. I'm doing this for you." Her mother looked at her, eyes filled with both sorrow and pride. In that tiny room, with only the hum of machines and the sound of shallow breaths between them, Elena made a vow. She wouldn't let anyone take her mother away, even if it meant giving up everything she was. 3 days later, Elena walked out of the training center holding a brand new professional driver's license under the name Ely Cruz, complete with a clean driving record, valid ID, and all the necessary documents. On paper, she was a highly skilled male chauffeur with no prior offenses and no traffic violations. No one knew it was all a mask. The moment she stepped outside, her phone rang. It was her best friend, Rena Thompson. Elena closed her eyes before answering. She knew what was coming. "Elena, have you completely lost it?" Rena's voice exploded through the phone. "You're seriously pretending to be a man to drive for some arrogant billionaire?" Elena sighed, eyes fixed on the ID in her hand. "I don't have a choice, Rena. My mom needs meds. Insurance denied us. This is the only job that pays enough, fast. There are hundreds of legal jobs out there. Why this one?" "Because none of them pay in 3 days, Elena snapped. "And none of them come with my uncle backing me up." Rena fell silent. She knew Elena wasn't one to be easily swayed. "This could land you in prison, Elena. And doing nothing will land my mom in a coffin." Her voice was colder than she meant it to be. That evening, Elena moved into the staff housing for Blackwell Enterprises drivers. Her room was tiny, barely enough space for a single bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. Everything was clean, sterile, like it was designed for someone not meant to stay long. She sat in front of the mirror, pulled off her cap, slicked her hair back, and slowly strapped on the chest binder, the thing that would help her become Eli each day. She took a deep breath, stood up, faced the mirror, deeper voice, stoic eyes, squared shoulders, tight jaw, a version of herself where weakness wasn't allowed. She picked up her phone and texted Rena, "I'm okay, starting tomorrow. No one can know." Then she lay down, still holding the phone in her hand. Sleep didn't come easy. Her mind kept replaying the image of her mother coughing, forcing a faint smile through the pain. Tomorrow, she would step into a world she didn't belong in. But for her mother, she would live in that world like she was born for it. The sky was still dim when Elena, or rather, Eli, stood waiting in the basement garage of Blackwell Tower. Her uniform was crisp, her hair slicked back with gel, and the chest binder beneath her shirt made it hard to breathe. Still, her expression remained calm and collected. A soft ding echoed from the private elevator. The doors slid open, and Damian Blackwell stepped out. Tall, composed, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit and sunglasses. His gaze scanned the space before landing squarely on Elena, standing beside a sleek black SUV, posture straight. "Are you the new driver?" His voice was deep, steady, almost emotionless. Elena gave a small nod. "Yes, sir. Eli Cruz, reporting for duty." Damian raised one eyebrow slightly. A brief silence followed. Elena held her breath. After a pause, Damian walked slowly toward the car. He didn't speak, just observed. Up close, he removed his sunglasses, revealing cold gray eyes that seemed to dissect her every move. "Too clean," he muttered. "No tickets, no complaints, no history." "You a saint, Cruz?" "Just well-trained, sir." He slid into the back seat. "Drive me to the Altair Club. You've got 18 minutes. Elena swallowed. "Copy that." Warning traffic in San Francisco was chaos. Honking horns, careless pedestrians, narrow lanes. Elena tightened her grip on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Damian sat silently in the back, tablet in hand, but now and then, his gaze would lift, meeting hers in the reflection. "I get the sense," Damian suddenly said, "you're not like the other drivers." Elena kept her voice low. "In what way, sir?" "Too quiet, too soft." Her hands gripped the wheel tighter, just focused on the job. Damian tilted his head, eyes like steel. "Then focus faster. We're 2 minutes behind." Elena responded evenly. "We'll adjust." At the Altair Club garage, Elena exited quickly to open Damian's door. He stepped out, but didn't walk off immediately. Instead, he paused, turned, and looked her over once more. "First impressions matter," he said slowly. "You're not what I expected." Elena tilted her head. "I hope that's a good thing." Damian narrowed his eyes. "We'll see." Then he turned and walked away, his shoes echoing across the polished marble floor. Elena remained by the car, trying to relax her shoulders, though her heart thundered in her chest. That man had looked straight through her. Without saying much at all, Damian Blackwell made one thing painfully clear. There is no room for mistakes here. Elena's breathing still hadn't returned to normal as she slid into the driver's seat. Just moments ago, Damian's gaze had pierced through the carefully built shell she wore, but now wasn't the time to break. She adjusted the rearview mirror and quietly studied his reflection. "Don't get pulled in," she reminded herself. "It's just a job." The SUV pulled out of the underground garage, merging into San Francisco's chaotic morning traffic. Trucks cut lanes, cabs weaved recklessly, horns blared from every angle. But her hands remained steady on the wheel, her face composed, as if none of it fazed her. In the back seat, Damian was silent, yet his silence was loud, dense. "Elena, no, Eli, don't speak," she told herself. "Don't invite attention." "Where did you train?" Damian asked suddenly, voice flat but laced with suspicion. "Private training, certified through internal agency, protocol." She'd rehearsed the line, "No hesitation, No nerves. Damien nodded slightly. He said nothing more, but in the mirror she saw him watching, not observing, analyzing. And it sent a chill down her spine. At a red light, the air inside the car thickened. Elena could hear the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her chest. "Do you know why the last driver was dismissed?" Damien asked, his eyes still fixed on his tablet. She tilted her head slightly. "Violation of company policy?" "No. He talked too much." Elena gripped the wheel tighter. "I don't like talkative people," Damien continued, "especially those who can't keep secrets." "Then I believe I'm the right fit," she said, voice low. "I have nothing to share." "Is that so?" Damien looked up, gaze sharp as glass. "Nothing to hide?" Elena paused for a second, then nodded slowly. "No, sir." He smiled, but it was colder than the ocean breeze. Upon arrival, Elena stopped precisely at the entrance. Damien opened the door, but didn't step out immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, his icy stare meeting hers through the rearview mirror. "You have very particular eyes, Cruz," he said. Elena didn't move. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "They're too gentle for this kind of work." The moment froze. "Thank you, sir." That line was the only armor she had left. Damien gave a small nod, then stepped out, disappearing into the building. Elena leaned forward against the steering wheel, exhaling deeply. She'd passed the first test, but nothing about it felt safe. Every question Damien asked felt like a blade brushing against her skin. Elena knew this wasn't about driving skill, it was about identity, and she had to win this game. Each time she answered, she forced her voice one tone lower. Slow, firm, steady. Her hands clutched the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Sweat pooled along her spine, sticking to the fabric beneath her uniform. But her expression? Calm, unflinching. But Damien's stare in the rearview mirror lingered like a silent spotlight. Each glance from him peeled back another layer. Elena pressed her lips together, controlling her breath. Her heartbeat slammed like war drums. She couldn't be soft, couldn't be feminine, couldn't be Elena. Right now, she was only Eli Cruz, a man no one had any reason to question. That night, Elena lay flat on her bed, staring at the pale yellow light seeping under the door. The clock blinked, 11:07 p.m. She couldn't sleep. Damien's look from earlier kept looping in her mind, cold, analytical, and something else she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed. "You're still awake, right? Open the door." Elena sat up like she'd been electrocuted. She read the message twice. Her heart started racing. She threw on her cap, adjusted her uniform, checked the tightness of her binder. Stay calm. He probably just forgot something, maybe a last-minute task. Don't panic. She opened the door and froze. Damien Blackwell, not in a suit, no tie, just a plain black t-shirt, dark jeans, and a paper bag in hand. "You need something, sir?" She lowered her voice, tightened her posture. Damien stared for a moment, then stepped in without invitation. "You didn't eat dinner, I figured." He set the bag on the table. The scent of warm takeout filled the tiny room. Elena stayed frozen. "Thank you. I was going to grab something after finishing my..." "Sit," he cut in, taking the only chair. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep distance. As she approached the bag, her shoelace caught the leg of the table and she tripped forward, straight into him. By reflex, Damien reached out to catch her. His hand landed on her chest. Elena froze. So did he. A single breathless second passed between them. Too still, too charged. She yanked herself upright, cheeks blazing red, pulling her shirt into place. Sorry, sir, that was clumsy of me." Damien didn't respond. He just looked at her. Long, intently, and not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Quiet understanding. "Be more careful," he said finally, his tone unreadable. He unpacked the food and set it on the table. Elena sat down across from him, head lowered. Her fingers trembled as she opened the lid. "How long you been living alone?" Damien asked, voice oddly soft. 3 years, sir. No girlfriend? No, sir. Why not? This job doesn't mix well with relationships. Damien nodded, gaze fixed on her. You're different from the others I've hired. Elena gave a small smile. I hope that's a good thing. Not sure yet. He narrowed his eyes, then added almost casually, Your shirt's a bit crooked. She stiffened. Her hand moved to adjust it. Her throat tightened. Silence stretched between them. She shoved a spoonful of rice into her mouth, chewing quickly. Anything to break the tension. Does he know? Is he just testing me? Damien stood. She thought he was leaving. But instead, he turned, arms crossed, eyes studying her. Not with suspicion now, but curiosity. Do you work out? Elena blinked. Excuse me? Monday morning, I train at the gym. I want my driver to train with me. I'm not used to that, sir. You'll adjust. He smiled, but the smile wasn't cold. It was almost challenging. Elena nodded. Understood, sir. Damien walked to the door. Before stepping out, he said quietly, We'll see who's really strong. The door shut behind him. Elena stood frozen, one hand over her chest where he'd touched her. But the thing that rattled her more than the fear of being exposed was the fact she didn't want his eyes to stop looking. After that night, though nothing was said aloud, something had shifted between them. Every glance, every word became more cautious, yet strangely more intimate. And in that silence, doubt began to grow on both sides. Damien had never been one to let distractions in, especially not from a driver. But with Eli Cruz, things were starting to drift off course. At first, it was simple curiosity. Then came the details. A voice that lacked true depth, a gait too light, eyes that avoided his, and a softness that felt off. During meetings, as Eli waited outside in the car, Damien caught himself glancing at the glass, watching the faint silhouette, the tiniest gestures. How Eli opened the car door, how he said yes sir in that low, practiced tone. He began to pull Damien's attention without permission. On Saturday night, the bass from the upscale downtown club pulsed through the walls. Strobe lights flickered, champagne glasses clinked. Soft touches and seductive glances surrounded Damien. This world had once felt like his. Power, distance, control. Tonight was no different. Clients toasted him, colleagues shook his hand, and, as usual, a few women gravitated toward him. Elegant, confident, certain of what they wanted. A redhead in a satin dress leaned in close, whispering, You look out of place here. Maybe I can help you loosen up. Damien gave a polite smile and set his glass down. No need. She raised an eyebrow, playful but probing. Really? A man like you doesn't like women? The question, meant to tease, made Damien pause. He scanned the room. Dim lights, thumping music, the scent of expensive perfume. None of it felt real. Only one image kept flashing in his mind. A small frame in a driver's uniform. Guarded eyes, soft-spoken voice. Eli Cruz. He couldn't remember the woman's name in front of him, but he remembered Eli waiting in the rain, the way he never quite met his eyes. That voice, too even, too carefully measured. Damien lifted his drink and downed it in one go. No words, just silence as he walked away. Later that night, he stood alone on a 27th floor balcony. The wind slapped his face, clearing the fog of music and alcohol. If this person isn't supposed to mean anything, then why can't I let them go? That's when he knew he needed answers. And there was only one way to get them: find out the truth about Eli Cruz. The next day, Damien met up with Julian, his cousin and former therapist, now a financial advisor. I don't know what's happening, Damien said quietly. Something's not right with the new driver. Julian raised an eyebrow. Not right how? It doesn't feel like a man. There's something forced in everything he does. Controlled. So what do you think? I'm not sure. I just know I need the truth. Julian set his glass down and looked at Damien with a seriousness that cut through the moment. "And what if the truth makes you feel something?" Damien looked away, silent. "I'm not afraid of the truth," he said eventually. "I'm afraid I won't be able to stop." Meanwhile, Alina sat alone in her room, the warm light casting shadows across her conflicted face. "What am I doing?" she whispered, voice barely holding together. This was supposed to be a role, a mask, a job to save her mother. But the closer she got to Damien, the more her real feelings slipped through the cracks. Every time he looked at her for just a second longer, her heart betrayed her. Elena doesn't get to fall in love, but Eli gets to be near him. And that terrified her the most. If he found out who she really was, it would all end. But if he didn't, her heart would only fall further. He had tried to ignore it all, the softness in Eli's steps, the guarded eyes, and the way his heart skipped every time the driver stood too close. But the more Damien tried to deny it, the deeper he was pulled toward the truth, and in one unexplainable moment, when he caught a glimpse of Eli through the rearview mirror, quiet, still, unsmiling, he knew that if he didn't face the truth now, he'd never forgive himself. That was the moment he called the investigator and said just one thing: "I need to know who she really is." The file sat on Damien's desk for 3 hours. He hadn't opened it the moment the investigator handed it over. Not because he feared the truth, but because he knew once he read it, he couldn't go back. At 1:00 a.m., he finally flipped to the first page. Full name: Elena Cruz. Gender: female. Previous job: home care assistant. Reason for identity change: suspected financial motive, assumed male identity. He stared at the last line of the file again. Eli Cruz was never real, but Elena, she was there all along. For a long while, Damien didn't move. He let the rain hit the windows, let silence settle into the room. Then, finally, he stood. If loving her was a mistake, it was one he was willing to make again. Rain tapped lightly on the pavement as Damien walked into the staff quarters. Every gut feeling, every subtle doubt, confirmed in black and white. Yet inside him, there was no anger. Just one thought: I don't want to lose her. Rain tapped lightly on the pavement as Damien walked into the staff quarters. He didn't text, didn't knock, just pushed open the half-closed door. Inside, Elena was packing. Her small suitcase lay open on the bed. Shirt, binder, shoes, documents. Everything neatly folded, as if she'd known this moment was coming. She turned sharply when the door opened. Fear spread across her face. What are you doing here?" Her voice trembled. Damien stood still for a moment. He looked at her, at the room he'd seen so many times, at the cap she used to wear every morning. "I know," he said, his voice low and calm. Elena lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry. You're leaving?" She nodded. "I can't stay now that you know. I didn't want to hurt you more." Damien stepped closer, his eyes filled with something new. Not anger, not betrayal, but ache and longing. "Elena," he said. Not Cruz, not kid, just her real name. "Do you really think I loved Eli?" he asked, holding her gaze. She couldn't answer. Damien stepped forward, gently took her hand, and placed it against his chest. "Then tell me what this is," he said, voice rough. His heart beat. "It's for you. For Elena, not Eli." Tears fell from her eyes, not from fear, but because she couldn't hold back anymore. "I was going to disappear before you could hate me. But why aren't you mad?" Damien smiled, a rare, honest smile. "Because I don't feel betrayed, I feel lucky, that now I finally know who you really are." Elena trembled. She leaned her forehead against his chest, where his heart beat fast and real, undeniable. In that moment, all disguises, all lies, all barriers fell. There was only him and her, and a truth that no longer needed to hide. He knew everything, but he still chose to love her. After that conversation, it seemed there was nothing left to hide between them. But sometimes the truth isn't just in words, it lives in moments where hearts still tremble. Elena tried day by day to live a little more honestly, but even though Damien had accepted her, the fear inside her hadn't completely faded. And then, in a moment neither of them planned, everything came undone. It was dusk when Damien called Elena into his office. He didn't give a reason, just said, "I need silence, but I don't want to be alone." She sat on the familiar leather chair, hands folded, steady in her Eli facade, though by now they both knew the mask had already fallen. Damien stood by the window, back turned. The air was heavy, not tense, just too close. When he turned and stepped toward her, she felt his breath skim her cheek. His hand reached out, gently, almost unconsciously, and brushed her chest, right over the spot where the padding had shifted after their gym session earlier. She jerked away instinctively. Damien froze. Silence fell like a curtain. "You don't have to," he began, but before he could finish, Elena turned and bolted out the door. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't risk believing again, not if he was going to walk away. Damien stood still for only a second. Then, for the first time in years, he grabbed the car keys himself. No driver, no security. Damien Blackwell, behind the wheel, chasing her through the descending night. He drove guided only by memory and, something deeper, instinct. He ended up in front of Elena's old apartment. The chipped door, the flickering hallway light. He hadn't been here before, but somehow it felt right. He pushed the door, it opened. Elena was curled up on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, eyes red. "How did you know I'd come here?" she whispered, broken. "I guessed," Damien replied, breathless, "and I'm not leaving until you hear me." He sat beside her, no touch, just presence, strong, real, steady. "You think I'd hate you?" he asked gently. "I think you'll regret trusting me," she said, voice barely audible. Damien let out a breath full of weight. He turned, met her eyes. "I don't care who you are, Elena. Not your name, not your past, not your body. I care that you're the first person who made me feel again." She stared at him, stunned. The defenses inside her, brick by brick, began to crumble. "I'm not in love with a gender," Damien continued. "I'm in love with how you care without speaking. How you stood in the rain just to wait for me. How you looked away every time I looked at you. And if that wasn't real, then nothing in this world is." Elena broke down, but not from fear, from the feeling of being truly seen. Damien held out his hand. This time, she didn't flinch. Her small hand fit into his, shaky but sure. Then he said, without hesitation, "Let's get married." She looked up. Time stopped. She had hoped for a second chance, a kind word, but not this, a vow. "You're serious?" she whispered, terrified to hope. Damien smiled, calm and true. "I've never been serious about anything until you." And for the first time in her life, Elena believed. She nodded. No more hiding, only the truth, only him. Sitting beside Damien in that small, old apartment, with her hand still in his, Elena found herself looking back at everything. She had once thought this job, pretending to be a man, hiding who she was, living under a name that wasn't hers, was just a cold transaction between responsibility and survival, a price she had to pay to afford her mother's treatment. Every time she rapped her chest, every time she forced her voice low, every time her heart ached for the man she was supposed to ignore, she would remind herself, "It's just a role. When it's over, I'll walk away." But now, in this moment, her heart gently held by his, not out of pity, but out of love and choice, Elena knew none of this was pretend anymore. She had thought she was just racing against time to save her mother's life. But somewhere along the way, she had found someone to spend hers with. A job that once felt like a temporary disguise a risky gamble, had become the place where she found her truth. With the first paycheck, she saved her mother. But through this job, she was the one who got saved. Saved from loneliness, from hiding, from the belief that she wasn't worthy of love. And now, with Damien by her side, she didn't have to perform anymore. She didn't have to hide. She only had to be Elena, the girl who once feared love, once hid from herself, but in the end was loved completely, without having to prove a thing. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the curtains of the small apartment, falling gently on Elena's face as she opened her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't have to wake up early to wrap her chest, lower her voice, or check a disguise. She was simply herself. Demia had woken up earlier. He stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, brewing coffee. When she stepped out, hair loose, a plain white shirt, no trace of Eli Cruz, he turned and smiled. "You finally look like yourself." She smiled, not Ellie's trained grin, but Elena's real one, soft, free. They had breakfast together, like two ordinary people, between old chairs and soft morning light. Few words were needed, yet every glance, every movement carried something new. The freedom to be real with the person who truly saw you. By noon, Damien brought her to a small gathering with a few close associates and family. Elena gripped his hand tightly as they entered. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "This doesn't need to be public if." Damien gave her hand a firmer squeeze, his gaze steady. "I've hidden how I feel for too long. With you, I have no reason to hide anymore." As everyone settled, Damien raised his glass. "There's someone I'd like you all to meet today." All eyes turned toward Elena. She lowered her head slightly, heart racing. Damien continued, calm and clear. "This is Elena, the most important person in my life. No labels, no definitions, just know. She's the one I choose. And the one I want to keep beside me." A few nods, some surprised glances, but no objections. And for Elena, that was enough. She was no longer a shadow. That night, they sat on the balcony together, under the soft glow of a hanging lamp. The city still buzzed below, but inside their small space, time slowed. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. Damien placed his hand over hers gently. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Loving someone like me?" He looked at her, no hesitation, no doubt. "I only regret not finding you sooner." She let her fingers trace the back of his hand. There was no grand speech, no vows written on paper, just this moment. Quiet, steady, and impossibly true. For years, she'd lived in fear of being seen, and now the man beside her saw everything and stayed. They gazed at each other. No more words were needed, only eyes speaking volumes of a future, a vow, a love without condition, no matter the past, no matter the lies that began it all. This ending was real, and it was theirs.